I want to just walk you through the program of the evening and then give a brief introduction to our first speaker, and then each speaker will introduce the next person or people who come after them. We're going to start with an introduction to our topic by Afrika Owes. We'll continue with the first public screening of Trouble Will Find You, and it will be introduced by the filmmaker who's here in the audience. There she is, Stephanie. We will then have a short presentation on the report that Priscilla and I have released today on the Bronx 120 prosecutions. And then we will have a panel that Alice Speri will moderate with people who are organizing on these projects and people who have been affected by them. Afrika will join us. Kraig will be there. Taylonn Murphy Sr., Vidal Guzman, and Priscilla and I will join to talk about our research as well. So that's the plan. It's actually pretty intense. So I'll just give a few words about Afrika and then let each speaker introduce the next. Afrika Owes is a community organizer who speaks truth to power. She shares her own experiences as a formerly incarcerated woman in a conspiracy and a gang case. She is also an administrative associate at the Center for Constitutional Rights, yay, where she works assisting the legal and advocacy departments. She was born, raised, bred, and bled in Harlem, New York City. Welcome, Afrika. Thank you.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. I think I wrote it right. I'm a former Fulbright scholar, and I am also a former felon. I open with these words because when you hear them, they somewhat exist on two totally different ends of the spectrum, two totally different worlds. And from looking at me, a lot of you probably wouldn't guess that I've ever had any police contact. I once told someone that I was formerly incarcerated, and they were like, "For what? Stealing some chips out the corner store?" On February 15th, 2011, I was arrested with 15 other co-defendants as part of a conspiracy to sell drugs and transport weapons. I was 17 years old, facing 25 to life. I had a very involved lawyer from the Neighborhood Defender Services of Harlem. She's here, but she told me not to shout her out, so this is my compromise. I had a very active community and support from my church, the Abyssinian Baptist Church, which is very rare. Because of that, I got my charges reduced to criminal possession of a weapon. I served only 6 months on Rikers Island, had 3 years probation, and my case was adjudicated as a youthful offender. I was accused of being in a non-existent gang, the 137th Street Crew. And if you're from Harlem or from the hood, does that even sound like a cool gang name to you? No. But at the time, it felt like my life was completely swept from under my feet. I couldn't even control my narrative or speak my truth. As you'll learn from Kraig's story and documentary, he and I are very similar. I was also an A student. I attended prep school, and my parents also saw education as a ticket out of the hood. The newspapers and prosecutor argued that I was living a double life, but I was not. I was both the smart prep school student in Massachusetts and the girl with the smart-ass mouth from Harlem. You can be both. But it was as if my dual identity infuriated the prosecutors. I did not fit into this box, so they wanted to vilify me. The media and government used the Bronx 120 as a political tool to boast their efforts. They ripped 120 young men from their families and bragged about it. as if this was a medal or some sort of accomplishment. Similarly, the newly elected DA in my case bragged that he was cleaning up the streets of Harlem with my case. To them, we were not people. We were numbers, dockets, and hopefully some money for their next election. We were badges to these politicians just looking to brag. When you Google the word gang, the first images you'll see are usually people of color, specifically men. When you ask the police what the definition of a gang member is, it's extremely broad. In many ways, it's as if Black and Latinx folk are marked as gang members from our birth. We're classified as gang members based on where we live, where we hang out, what we wear, how we style our hair, our favorite colors, the music we listen to, and even our likes on Facebook. We are constantly policed for simply being Black. And I also think it's important to note, while men are overrepresented in these cases, women are also affected, whether it's being arrested or the families or the women at the forefront organizing, showing up to court, and constantly advocating for these men. We're also here too. Despite my arrest, I was able to graduate from Hobart and William Smith colleges with Latin honors, teach English in South Africa as a Fulbright Fellow, and work at the Center for Constitutional Rights, while witness attorneys stand up against injustice daily. I use my privilege to give back because I was given a second chance, and I know that my intersectional experiences, both extremely privileged and oppressed, are meant to give me tools to teach my community to empower themselves. Like many of the other panelists that you'll hear from today, I have found success in sharing my story, but along the way, I have also been rejected, redirected, and sometimes I felt defeated. However, there is strength in community. We have all been bent, but none of us have ever been broken. And we continue to speak our truths to power. As you watch and listen to our stories, I hope that you are inspired, I hope that you are intrigued, I hope that you learn something, but most of all, I hope that you are enraged. I hope that you leave here angry, pissed off, angry enough to act, angry enough to turn your emotion into activism. Take this knowledge into classrooms, boardrooms, social media, peers, your local reps, your district reps, anybody that will listen. I hope that no matter what you feel and no matter what you learn today, you too are inspired to continue speaking truth to power. Thank you. It's my pleasure to introduce Stephanie Tangkilisan. Stephanie is a documentary filmmaker and journalist based in New York, but was born and raised in Indonesia. Tangkilisan's work focuses on telling stories of injustice in an intimate way. Her first documentary, made in collaboration with the Intercept, won the Vidal Project's Criminal Justice Grant and had been selected to show at film festivals. Stephanie.
As you can tell from my last name, I am not from here. It's always a challenge to pronounce my last name, but I first met Kraig in court August of 2018, and back then, Kraig was facing, he was going to plead out to 5 years and was very, very close to having to serve that sentence. It was that day that I also met his mom and his aunt. And then I went home and I wrote Kraig a handwritten letter to him while he was still in Metropolitan Detention Center. It was from there that I had the privilege to get to know Kraig and his family, and to really understand the impact of what gang policing meant to people's lives and people's families. And that's what I wanted to do in this documentary, because it's not just Kraig's life that's been completely disrupted. It was his entire family, his mom, his dad, his young son, his aunt, his entire extended and lovely family. And that was what I really wanted to focus in this film, to show that it was not only Kraig, but the rest of the 119 people in this case that was wrapped up and had their lives completely obliterated. Coming from Indonesia, where a lot of us don't really think of the criminal justice system as just, it was really interesting to see the difference in how some people perceived PREET BHARARA, for example, as someone who is defending rights of liberal rights, but completely delaying the lives of others. Having come from Indonesia also, my grandfather was a political prisoner, and his incarceration affected him and his life and my family's life for now, basically, and that's why and he was punished for his association to people that he thought were his friends. So that's why, with that lens in mind, that was, the long journey that took almost a year and a half to make this film, and a complete privilege to get to know Kraig's family and know this case as someone who came from Indonesia in 2018. But thank you so much, everyone, for being here and watching the show. Thanks.
Bitch, I'm back in my bag, I don't care. Roll it out with some smoke in the air. If you love me or you don't, be aware. My attitude is like, fuck it, I don't care. Bitch, I'm back in my bag, I don't care. Roll it out with some smoke in the air. If you love me or you don't, be aware. My attitude is like, fuck it, I don't care. Okay, I'm back in my bag.
How you feeling, Kraig?
Good. Happy to be here. He was not here last year, bro. I was in the cell shaking Pepsis, you heard? Like, you know how that shit go. Yeah, that way.
My name is Kraig Lewis. First nickname is Flock. And when I was younger, they called me K-Murder, and this name kind of got me indicted.
This is the hood life. This is where we grew up at. I mean, so if you take those young boys, and those young boys, put them together and give them a name, they're getting indicted.
Growing up, I was halfway in, halfway out. By the time I cleaned up myself and really got focused, it was too late. April 2016, I just picked my son up. It was his spring break. Went to sleep in my house in Connecticut, because I lived in Connecticut. Then boom, 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 boom. My son is downstairs, he's crying. Oh, we got a warrant for your arrest, and I'm like, warrant? You got the wrong guy, like, like, nah, not me.
Of New York. Today we announce what is believed to be the largest gang takedown in New York City history. We have charged 120 defendants in 2 rival Bronx street gangs with racketeering, narcotics, and firearms offenses.
These gang members do not belong on our streets. Instead, they belong exactly where they're going, to federal prison for many years, where they won't be surrounded by their buddies, they won't be close to their families, and they'll no longer be free to terrorize the neighborhoods in which they grew up.
A federal indictment, the FBI, I never even got arrested. I never been in handcuffs before that, ever. Man, they transferred me to the Bronx. I got into the precinct. I seen all my childhood friends that was already in jail. Like, I haven't seen them in years. Now I'm thinking I'm gonna get out bail, like the TV shows. And the judge is like, we're gonna set this bail at $1.5 million. I'm like, 1.5, I'm looking around, I'm looking like, yo, it is over. Like, where am I gonna get that? Like, I was supposed to graduate, get my master's, my MBA in business. All of that was just taken from me. It shook my world upside down. He put me on my head, man, like.
My name is Cheryl Glenn. I'm the mother of Kraig Lewis. I work as a registered nurse. When this happened, it was like an out-of-body experience. I could not believe this is happening. I always told him that people can take a lot from you. The only thing they cannot have is your education. But now, looking back now, I'm not so sure.
I mean, I ain't cried, but I wanted to. I wanted to bad.
He constantly would say, I can't believe this is happening to me. Mom, I'm in jail.
Second to the top, right there, the corner room, that was my shit.
When we locked in at 9, I just sat like at a long, skinny window. You could see outside, and you could see the water, and you could see the Statue of Liberty. Rikers Island, there's a lot of fighting. This one, there's a lot of killing. They gonna kill you. They playing with knives in there.
The one thing that shook me up in there was like when one of my friends got stabbed in his neck and he got paralyzed, cause anything in jail can start a fight. You going over memories, whose car is faster can start a fight. It take a toll on you mentally, cause you gotta be ready every day.
Every visit was hell. Every single one. First time I was hyperventilating, and when he came, I just could not stop crying.
They came with a plea. I took the plea. I took the plea.
He was the best looking baby I've ever seen in my entire life, and he belonged to me. He went to pre-K, he left New York, he was at Nativity, actually a Catholic school, and he went to Florida.
Parents split up. It was like a whole nother world, because I'm growing up in Orlando and we in Christian school, and so I came back to New York, and I mean, I got adjusted to the New York life, but you gotta grow up fast. When you grew up, you had to fight. You had to get fight. If you wasn't tough, you wasn't gonna survive. And like, they prey on the weak. So if you're weak, they gonna try to get you, you know? So it's the circumstances, the neighborhood. We don't have no money, and everybody wanna be popular, everybody wanna get ahead. We was getting into fights all the time, and it was like, all right, I'm gonna stay in private school, because this is right here. So I got focused. I started getting A's. It was just like, I just decided to put my work into school, because that's what my parents wanted.
I had KK, my son, when I was 18 years old. It was an eye-opener, and it made me push further. So I go to college because I have a son. When I get my degree, I'll be able to take care of him because I have a job to support him.
I got a scholarship to the University of Bridgeport. Not athlete, it was because of my grades. So I majored in criminal justice, A's, Dean list. But on my spare time, I'm still hanging out. So I was around people that broke the law a lot.
Fuck is flying, niggas. We catch you niggas slipping, that's the first 48, nigga.
You know, I was dabbling in the music because I had a friend, he's locked up right now, best rapper ever, to me.
That money blowing like fans now.
You gonna be the one to take us out the neighborhood, take us out this mess that we in.
Them niggas telling, my team too fly with a couple of felons. Your hoe be stretching, she give me that brain like she teaching a lesson. Boy, count your blessing, next shot I take gon' hit your melon. And I know he's stressing, I stole this bitch and now she flexing.
I got cut my first year in college. I didn't see the dude with the knife. It was all over a girl and messed up me mentally. So it was like I'm balancing two lives. I carried guns to protect myself. It was like people was trying to kill me. That was it. I moved. I was done in New York.
And for years, he did not live in the Bronx. For years. For years, I would not be able to get him to spend a weekend with me. He disliked New York and disliked the Bronx.
Why?
Because whenever he comes around, there will be an incident.
They took my whole childhood, the 120 people. Like, everybody fighting their case right now. It's like all my childhood friends are in jail.
I'm more worried about my kids. I'm not trying to be selfish or nothing, but it's like, damn.
I got caught up in the RICO. The RICO is dangerous. The thing is, you don't really gotta do much, you know? They say you can't be guilty by association, but I don't think that's true. Even if you ain't committing a crime, just because you're a part of RICO as a conspiracy, you're guilty. All right, you see these 3 sheets that you just gave me? These 3 sheets right here is probably the most incriminating stuff that they had on me. But this right here, like me arguing about what's going on in the neighborhood, or me gossiping about what's going on in the neighborhood, but it's no crimes. Like, if I throw up a sign, does that mean I just killed somebody? You understand what I'm saying? Does that mean that I just sold 200 pounds? Meaning, because I chill with this person, and you chill with that person, and we chill together, that means that to them, we are a crew, and if he commits the crime, we're all responsible for whether we knew he did it or not, because we're all together. Like, it's not right, it's not fair. You know, put my picture of me, like, picture of me on Christmas, like, am I killing somebody? No, I ain't killing nobody. I look pretty clean if you ask me. You know what I mean? And right now, it's like, it's really hard for me to get a job. I got a degree. I wanted to be a lawyer. I got big shoes to fill. My dad's an engineer, mother, a nurse, 2 jobs, teacher, and here I am.
I just came home, you feel me? I mean, I went through a lot.
They had my back against the wall, but I had to stand tall. Had to get my mind right, so I had to study law. Being locked up in the feds, I swear to God, I seen it all.
I cannot see him being the rapper or the entertainer he would like to be. That is not my hope for him, but I can see him creating a superstar.
Fuck niggas gon' make me go get some money. Fuck niggas gon' make me keep my bitches cause they funny. When I ran it up,
I thought, like, I'm not in the streets, I'm just making music. So I didn't even know, like, I didn't even know feds watching me, like, you know what I'm saying? I just surround myself, like my brothers just helped me promote my music. It wasn't like we was some mafia calling out hits. No, it was none of that.
We got more people coming home too. I can't wait till they touch down. It's like a good 6 people coming home. Brandon, Daquan, Rodney.
Yo, bro, fuck out of here. Yo, we inside street, bro.
Nah, man, it's emotional, bro. I'm trying to keep it like together. Yeah, bro, I hope I come back. I hope I come back, bro.
You remember the day you came out?
I'm looking like...
He hasn't seen sun. It was wet. And I think he didn't care less. He was like...
it was raining. I didn't need no hood. I didn't need nothing.
Oh, my God. You were just... here we go again, huh?
Yeah. You know. Time served. Couple years probation, but it's better than jail. So you gonna buy me a bottle of champagne or not? Please?
I just paid your bill.
Oh. Oh, man. Oh. Yo, man.
He lost a lot of confidence in himself. So he's going to try to get a job, anything. Prior to this, my son reached for the sky.
No problem.
Right now, I'm doing music. I know everybody do music, but the thing about my busyness is that I'm doing it on my own. It's not like a company telling me what to do. It's independent. It's not just music, it's events and the music tied together. I mean, yeah, I like that song, so I'm gonna go to his party. I can make money off of that. Years down the line, when I listen to it, I'm gonna always remember, like, this is how I was feeling when I first came home. And I don't want to be that person that just came out and did nothing. This is my son KK. I mean, he's 8 years old.
Kraig, where are we going?
Orlando, my family, my pops. That's where we going down there to see them.
I owe you that.
My senior day, this is the picture that they gave me, and you know, they called me out to the middle of the floor, Bridgeport basketball, and they acknowledged Kraig, and they acknowledged, you know, all the parents of the seniors, and this was a big day for me. I wasn't expecting it. Being a black man, you're born with a disadvantage, your color. Number one, you got a scar on your face. And then number two, now you got a felony. So you got 2 strikes against you. Then you got the 3rd strike, you're black. So your walk is heavy. You're not gonna face the everyday trouble that you face in New York down here. You have to go find the trouble. Over there, as soon as you walk out the door, it's there waiting for you.
I'm relaxed. Not really nothing to worry about. I got a lot of family down here, so this is more like family oriented. Down here, like,
every day I would pray, I hope my dad gets out of jail. And one day it actually came true. My mom had no help. I wanted to see my dad. It was hard to think, because I called him. What did he say? I don't remember. I just know it's not him. It's the people who he hangs around with. If his mom keeps telling him that, and he just won't listen.
that's what hurt me the most, cause when I got arrested, I was with him. He was asleep in the bed, and I tried to put myself in his shoes, like he woke up and he don't know where I'm at. And after that day, I ain't see him for like 3-4 months. But it got to a point where it's like I had to accept the fact that I'm not getting out. My son that's my heart, like, that's like my twin. He's more like my best friend. Like, my pops is more on my best friend's side. I want to be more like his best friend. I don't hit him, I don't do nothing. I talk to him like, Daddy who? I wasn't around like 5, 6. I came home when he was 7. It's about how can I become successful so when he asks me for something, I could give it to him so he don't gotta go steal it. Or, oh, my dad don't got no money, and my mom don't got it, so I gotta go sell these drugs. I missed 2 years. I can make it up. I'm gonna make it up. I believe in myself. I know I can do it. I'ma do it. I'ma do it.
April 26th, the feds came in, it hurt. In the courtroom, see my mama go berserk. She was crying. Never thought I'd see free Flocka on a shirt. Death penalty, charged with murder in the first. A nigga home and they think I'm on. When I'm on the road on camera phones, groupies give me don't.
Yo, talk your shit, homie. I mean, free the guys till you see the guys. Just for the ones behind the wall. He right here.
Yo, you already know, man. What's flying, G's? You already know, man. It's a takeover, bro. Like, niggas about to do it behind the wall shit and all that. I mean, for y'all behind the wall, you heard?
No, this for y'all niggas facts, bro. He's there with you.
I miss you to death, Chris Paul, you heard?
Nearly 700 federal agents descended on the Bronx, New York in pre-dawn raids that led to the arrest of 120 reputed rival gang members.
I see. Sorry about that. So up next we have Professor Babe Howell and Priscilla Bustamante, both who co-authored this report that you're going to be seeing. Professor Howell is a professor at CUNY School of Law. She teaches criminal law, trial advocacy, professional responsibility, and lawyering. Her research is focused on the over-policing and over-prosecution of communities of color. She has written several articles on the impact of gang allegations in the criminal justice system. Priscilla Bustamante is the co-author of the forthcoming Bronx 120 report. She is getting her PhD in critical social psychology at the Graduate Center at CUNY, where her research focuses on state-sanctioned dehumanization and the human impact of policing on communities of color. She's born and raised in New York City.
Thank you. Jesse? Yeah, you got it. Okay, and you've seen and heard very powerful individual stories. There's 120 of those. We are not going to tell them, but the work we do, I think, is very important in terms of these stories not repeating and repeating and repeating ad infinitum. Priscilla and I are releasing this report today. We're very excited to share some of the findings of the report with you all, and we hope that the numbers of how shocking these abuses are, it's not one or two Craigs, it's not one or two Africas. The overbreadth of these prosecutions surprised even me, and I had very, very low expectations. So, clicker. I never use clickers. No, doesn't work. The keyboard. All right. So we are not going to be as exciting though, because we're sharing findings, but we'll try to do our best to be quick. A brief roadmap of the presentation is how we got involved in doing this research, how we did our research on the Bronx 120, our major findings, and how you can use our interactive website. Thank you, Fred McGovern, for fixing us up with this, to look into the data and answer your own questions. And finally, why this work is so very, very important. It's not just the 120, it's hundreds of raids, and it's not just federal raids, it's not just RICO, state conspiracy cases as well. So why did we get into gang policing and prosecution? I got here pretty much for the same reason the NYPD did, except from the opposite perspective. In 2012, October, Bill Bratton announced, I'm sorry, it was Ray Kelly at that point, announced Operation Crew Cut, one or the other, Ray Kelly. He announced Operation Crew Cut, a new targeting of gangs and neighborhood crews in an era when crime was at historic lows and when NYPD data that I got through a Freedom of Information Law request showed that gang crime accounted for less than 1% of the crime. So why quadruple your gang squads? Why focus on gang policing? The class had just been certified in Floyd v. City of New York, the stop and frisk case. The tool for profiling these same defendants, they were being stopped and frisked 685,000 in 2011. That's inside the 9 years that they say this Bronx 120 case takes place over. So they were being, the NYPD was looking like it was going to lose a court case. More importantly, they were losing public support. Every mayoral candidate was taking a position against them. Press was taking position against them. And New Yorkers were understanding that stop and frisk was race-based, discriminatory, and violated the Constitution. They needed a new tool, the NYPD did, for profiling youth of color. because they rely on profiles and believe in them and think that the way to control crime is controlling black and brown men, whether they do anything seriously wrong or not. So I started looking at gang policing because I was pretty much predicting even before 2012 that they would pivot to gang policing. I was trying to get the folks focused on stop and frisk to add this in, and I wish I'd been wrong, but I wasn't. We saw dozens and dozens and dozens of raids, and we chose the Bronx 120, also the Harlem 103, but the data in state courts is very hard to get at. So we looked into this report, and Priscilla can tell you how we looked into the report, looking at all the documents and what we found. And in fact, before we go there, we've seen PREET already, but I would like to play back what he said about these indictments, because what he said about them is what framed our inquiry more than anything else. Was it true or not? And let me see, I don't seem to have a mouse. I do have a mouse. Oh, thank you. If we could play 50 seconds.
My name is PREET, and I'm the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York. Today we announce what is believed to be the largest gang takedown in New York City history. We have charged 120 defendants in 2 rival Bronx street gangs with racketeering, narcotics, and firearms offenses. In addition, the charges include allegations of multiple murders, attempted murders, shootings, stabbings, and beatings committed in furtherance of federal racketeering conspiracies. Yesterday evening and early this morning, nearly 700 NYPD officers and federal agents swept through the city to make arrests and to conduct court-authorized searches.
What he said about the Bronx 120 is that there were 120 defendants in 2 rival Bronx street gangs. That's a quote. He also said that the charges include allegations of multiple murders, attempted murders, shootings, and stabbings. Another quote. And that for years, in fact, they claim 9 years, these rival crews, these 120, had terrorized the neighborhood. So we looked into this. Is it true? Were they gang members? What about the charges? Did they terrorize the neighborhood? And the first thing we found, I'll let Priscilla tell you.
So were the Bronx 120 gang members? The surprising answer to this question is that more than half of the Bronx 120 were not affirmatively alleged to be members of either rival gang. And the chart here shows this breakdown. Only 56 individuals, less than half of all the defendants, were alleged to be members of a gang or crew. 34 people were not members. 17 people were labeled as associates of or associated with a gang. But from government sentencing memos, the prosecution makes clear that defendants who are gang associates are not gang members, which brings the total of non-gang members to 51 people. And for 13 individuals, membership status is unknown, although it's likely that these individuals would also be labeled as non-gang members, since the prosecution usually asserted membership whenever they could, and no evidence of membership was presented for these 13 people either.
Okay, and the next question, if they're not gang members, were the 120 violent? What we found is 2 out of 3 of the defendants, when they were convicted, and unfortunately all were convicted, 115 pled, 2 went to trial and were convicted on very weak evidence, 3 were given noles, a declined prosecution. But of those who pled, 2/3 were not convicted based on conduct that was alleged to be violent. Well over half were convicted based on conduct, either predicate acts for the RICO charges, gets a little complicated as a legal matter, but the predicate acts or the conspiracy to distribute narcotics, for half of them, we're talking drug sales, and 35 of them were marijuana sales, which would be a misdemeanor in New York courts. They move it up to a conspiracy to sell usually 50 kilograms or more because they count all the nickel and dime sales over 9 years of 120 people. And they get to 50 kilos. Now, I'm not going to even try to explain RICO in depth, but I would like to frame the question of that we were asking in this, are they a criminal enterprise? RICO was designed and passed in order to give a tool for federal law enforcement to take down powerful, sophisticated, organized crime. The mafia and other organized crime that infiltrates the legitimate economy. One justification was that defendants in these cases, A, could use sophisticated methods to hide their conduct, and B, that they could afford legal teams of top-notch status and run circles around the government.
So these defendants are accused of being part of a sophisticated or well-resourced criminal enterprise. But despite these accusations, nearly all of those indicted in this allegedly huge criminal enterprise could not afford to hire their own attorney. So with the exception of 9 defendants, 92% were instead appointed an attorney. And it's worth noting that before these 9 hired their own attorneys, almost all were appointed an attorney first, without objection, meaning that the prosecutors agreed that those arrested could not afford to hire their own counsel. So while RICO conspiracy charges are being used, we don't actually see a wealthy and sophisticated criminal enterprise.
Okay. We heard in the announcement that there were that they were being charged with racketeering and narcotics conspiracy and firearms. That's true. The indictment had 4 charges against most of the individuals. Some were charged with 1, some were charged with all 4. Each of the charges did not necessarily involve any violence, though. RICO conspiracy can be based on drug sales. Narcotics distribution and narcotics sales near school, also nonviolent. And the firearm charges were charges that could be satisfied by either possession, brandishing, or use of a firearm. The indictments did not provide specifics about any one of these individuals. So someone like Kraig Lewis, who we see here today, couldn't be differentiated from the person who might be linked to the murders. The announcement served, in this case, to lump all 120 defendants together, and the indictment did nothing whatsoever to indicate, wait, your client only has marijuana charges as their involvement, or your client is not in either one of these crews or gangs. And this chart shows the difference between the initial charges and the disposition charges in light pink. The disposition charge is the most important thing you're seeing here, and you can look at the report later, so we're not going into tons of details, is that only 22 of these 120, about 1 in 6, were convicted of the firearm charge. And of those 22, 16 of them were not convicted of discharging the firearm. So we have a sweep of 120 claimed to be involved in shootings, and only a handful were convicted of discharging a firearm. But, question, did they somehow terrorize the community in other ways that weren't captured in the indictment? We looked at criminal history to get this information.
Yeah, so when we looked at the criminal history of those indicted, only 1/3 of the 120 had a prior felony conviction. 18 had only misdemeanor records. 28 people had no criminal convictions at all. Another 4 had no reported convictions, which likely means they also had no criminal history. 14 individuals previously received only youthful offender or juvenile adjudications, which means they only have a charge for a crime they committed when they were 18 or younger. And these charges are typically sealed, but what we're seeing is that these YOs or JOs are often being used as evidence of a defendant's criminal history or predicate acts. And so overall, out of the defendants whose criminal history is known, only 1/3 had a prior felony conviction. Nearly 60% had either no criminal history at all or had only a previous misdemeanor or youthful offender conviction, challenging the narrative that the Bronx 120 were a group of people who had been terrorizing their community.
Okay, and now I'm going to show you something neat. You have a question. Hey, what about these folks who only have no criminal record? I want to know more about them. It's not in Babe and Priscilla's report. We're going to go to the Bronx 120.report, where you can find our report, and more importantly, you can find the data. If you click on that, which I did, yay, you will see a window that opens into our Airtable data. It's best viewed on a desktop, although I've been using my laptop. And you can download all data if you want to play with it in your own databases. But for our purposes, we're willing to look at it online. And we'll just say, okay, I'm showing 117 records. That's because we decided to leave out the 3 cooperators. There's very little paper trail, and their dispositions are wildly different. And so there's 117 records here. If I want to filter it and see who's got no criminal record, I can simply put in my field criminal history. And say, is exactly no misdemeanors. And I don't know if you can see at all what I'm doing, probably not, but it's exciting. And then I have only 28 records to look at to see what is it that these people, who are they? If you really want to know, you can look into the indictments. We semi-anonymize this so people can't just Google folks and see that they're one of the Bronx 120. But you can look at whether they got bail or not. Many of them were remanded, what their sentences were, and what their predicate acts or convictions were for. I encourage y'all to play with that, but I won't continue to play with it no matter how much fun I'm having. We will go back to the PowerPoint, and you want to get me to the right place?
Oh, I guess we have to start it again.
We're just going to go through this. Sorry, I'm not familiar with this computer. So we answered the questions of where you can look for questions you have. And we've kind of answered they're not gang members, they're not violent, they haven't been terrorizing their community. The process they get is ridiculous, though. Incredibly unfair. We start with these general indictments that don't differentiate between people who are charged with serious conduct, and a handful were, and all the rest. They are routinely denied bail, except if the prosecution agrees to bail conditions. 101 of them were, oops, that's her point. I'm not going to cover that. They're not told, except 6 months later, what the conduct is, and that's in an enterprise letter, which is secret from the public. We can't know what the prosecutors are doing in this case. There's also protective orders over the discovery. Speedy trial protections are waived for everyone, so these folks are in jail until they plead. And plead they do. And then many of these individuals had been previously prosecuted for the same conduct. This doesn't violate double jeopardy because the RICO charge has different elements and it's in a different jurisdiction. That works in conspiracy cases too. I can prosecute in state court, it's the same jurisdiction, but I'm adding elements. So the process was incredibly unfair, and we'll just touch on a couple of the big statistics before we close it out.
Yeah, so what Babe was going to say, looking at pretrial detention, 101 of the Bronx 120 were detained without the possibility of posting bail. So 46 people requested bail hearings, but prosecutors often objected, and most of these individuals were determined to be a risk of flight or danger, and so they remained detained. Only 19 individuals were ultimately released on bail, with bail set anywhere from $10,000 to $400,000 for these individuals. And the few who were released were subject to strict release conditions, with 15 out of the 19 confined to house arrest, unable to leave their homes.
And as I mentioned before, we found that 54 the defendants seemed to have been prosecuted previously for the conduct. Oftentimes it was even sold marijuana and did 2 days of community service. It's things that the defense lawyers in this room have said, you don't have a record. This is a violation. They used prior conduct, including arrest without convictions, misdemeanor convictions, youthful offender convictions, and they recharged the same offenses. Some of them were likely recharged and others didn't appear to be recharged. In one of the most egregious incidents, the story of JB, this young man did kill a woman. He shot accidentally through her window when trying to scare off someone else 7 years before this case was brought, and he was sitting in state prison for those 7 years, serving a 14-year sentence for that manslaughter. They brought him into this case. He's one of the 5 homicides that's mentioned, and they gave him a new RICO felony based on the same homicide. He got no extra time. This is theater. This is a show. This is going out there, criminalizing whole communities, saying we're bringing them in for murder, when the murderers, some of them were already in prison, they were identified in state jail. They do flip people in these cases to try to get solve unsolved crimes, but that's not what RICO was supposed to be for. So there were 5 homicides. Eventually, 6 of the individuals were sentenced based on their conduct that was claimed to relate to the homicides. One of them went to trial. He got life plus 55 years. The gunman in that case got half the 55 years, 27.5. So there's a bit of a trial tax. And that evidence was very weak. So going back to the initial statements, I doubt you've forgotten them. Half were not gang members. The majority were not convicted based on violent conduct, despite the press release. And in 9 years, there were 5 homicides, and 114 of these defendants were not involved in them. So why does it matter? Obviously, it matters to the 120, to the 114. It's not a fair process, even if you did the worst of these offenses. But if we care about racism, then we have to care about these mass prosecutions. By using a label that mobilizes racist fears of young men of color and immigrants, the prosecution and police are sweeping up the good with the bad and slamming them with charges based on the conduct of their peers. These gang prosecutions affect not only those prosecuted, and we heard that today, but the communities that are targeted, and they also affect our entire society. They reinforce broader racist narratives in this country by irresponsibly exaggerating the relationship between young men of color and violence. We've rejected profile-based policing. The gang label and narrative allows the police to track, mark, target, and take dragnet approaches to the same communities they've targeted in the past. And we need to stop this, so we'll take the next panel and talk about what we might be doing. I would say on the prosecutorial front, instead of prosecuting these cases, they ought to be prosecuting corruption. They ought to be enforcing laws against civil rights violations, police misconduct. There's a lot of very serious work that prosecutors ought to be doing instead of taking easy convictions and giving big press conferences that are unfair, inaccurate, and feed racism. Thank you. We're going on the panel now. So let me introduce Alice Speri from the Intercept, who was critically important in bringing us here together, and I had her bio and might have left it over there. Anyway, she's a wonderful reporter from the Intercept and brought us all here together, and we are very, very excited for her to conduct a panel with all the speakers you've heard tonight and other affected members from the community. And Kraig Lewis, our film star.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. As Babe said, my name is Alice Speri. I'm a criminal justice reporter at The Intercept. And before I introduce you to all the people you haven't met yet, I just wanted to tell you 2 words about how I got into this work, because I think the role of the media in all of this is actually quite crucial. Back in 2014, before I joined The Intercept, I was a reporter at a different publication, and I got a press release, as we often do, from the Manhattan DA, talking about what at that time was called the largest gang takedown in New York City history. And that was the raid of the Manhattanville and Grand houses in Harlem, which you'll hear a lot more about from some of our speakers. But you know, as reporters too often do, I took that press release, which was not very different from the press conference you watched, and kind of ran with it. And you know, the headline was catchy. It was 103 kids were caught because of their Facebook posts. And this was the largest gang in the city, and that was kind of the extent of my story, and that was kind of the extent of a lot of the New York media's coverage of that case, which is embarrassing in retrospect, and which I always felt very ashamed of. And that story didn't make a lot of sense then. It doesn't make any sense now. It just should have been questioned, as all of these press releases and all of these press conferences always should be. But by the time that, you know, in 2016, we had this press conference and this press release and the Bronx 120 case, I was in a different position. I had a lot of questions lingering about the earlier case, and I was able to look at it a lot more critically and kind of follow it since, you know, in the last few years, and connect with a lot of people, many of whom are in this room, who have been doing this work for years, trying to really get people to question these headlines and to kind of push beyond the narrative that we're all fed, and ask some questions about this stuff, and really be skeptical of the line we're getting. And I think it's very important to know there is this huge work that's happening in the city. People are trying to let us all know what these gang prosecutions are about, what the NYPD gang database is about. There's far too much we don't know, but that information is out there for you know, us reporters to report, and for everybody else to kind of demand. So I hope y'all leave here doing that. On that note, you've met Priscilla, Babe, Afrika, and Stephanie, so let me introduce you to Kraig, who you've also heard a lot about. But Kraig Lewis grew up between Florida and the Bronx. In 2013, he graduated from the University of Bridgeport, Connecticut, where he kept a 4.0 GPA while also running track. In Bridgeport, he volunteered with the local NAACP, coached the kids' basketball team, and organized a Stop the Violence basketball tournament. He was the chairman of the university's UNICEF chapter, and he is a devoted father to his 9-year-old son. In April 2016, while living in Connecticut and studying for his MBA, Kraig was arrested and charged as part of the Bronx 120 raid. He spent the following 22 months at the MDC before being released last year. And to my right, Vidal Guzman. Vidal was raised by a single mother of 3. When he was 16 years old, he was tried as an adult. And although he was released before turning 18, he was again incarcerated a year later and spent 5 years upstate. After coming home, he worked for Snow Day, a nonprofit that hires young people who have just been released from adult prisons. And after experiencing poverty, homelessness, and surviving gang life, and being incarcerated, Vidal knew that he had to fix the broken system, and the way to do that was to invest in local neighborhoods and build the community up. He now works as a community organizer for Just Leadership USA, working on local issues like the Close Rikers campaign. And last but not least, sorry, too many people. Taylonn Murphy Sr. Is the founder of the Tashana Chicken Murphy Foundation that serves at-risk youth and was formed in honor of his daughter Tashana, a high school basketball star and playground legend who was killed by gun violence in September 2011. Taylonn wears many hats as an advocate, freedom fighter, credible messenger, and above all, a humanitarian. He has endured 4 trials in the Queen's justice system and knows firsthand what to expect, having dealt with numerous attorneys and prosecutors throughout his trials. Taylonn is an inspiration, and while coping with the loss of his beloved daughter, he has made it his goal to turn his tragedy into a lifelong mission of service to those in need. So thank you all so much for being here, and let's get right to it and start with Kraig. How are you feeling?
I'm good. I had to check.
So we've heard a little bit about your story here, but can you tell us what was your life like before all of this happened, and then what has it been like since, and what has it been like being back in the Bronx, which you've been forced to by your probation conditions and seeing some of the people that were your co-defendants?
Before this happened, like I knew like it could be rough dealing with the police, and I experienced like little bit because of stop and frisk, but like I never been arrested, you know. So being in Catholic school, I used to avoid like I'd be playing basketball and something will happen, and I'll come home and see it happen, and I know what's like going on and stuff, but I'll never be there. I got to go to college, I got to learn, and like before I got arrested, it was beautiful. I played basketball, I was throwing the parties, making music. I was doing whatever I wanted to do, and all my friends used to get in trouble when I was younger, so I knew I wanted to be a lawyer to like try to help, like help people like with the Bronx 120. I mean, I happened to be like in the Bronx 120, so like it kind of slowed me down on the helping. But in jail, like I used to help with the law library and show them what's going on, but like it's only so much everybody would have took in anyway, and it's a lawyer job, and I got cuffs on, so. After jail, it's been really hard, like, but with my education, I was able to like create things like events and fundraisers to like give a positive energy in my neighborhood, try to like pick everybody's head up, because when I came home, everybody's heads was down, and my education, I mean, because I can't get a real good job like that with my knowledge is worth. Every job I try, close the door. Flagging, I'm not gonna name the company, but I'll be getting paid $14, and that's under minimum wage. And I got a degree in, you know, but that's like the life I gotta live now. I mean, so events like this will put people that's powerful enough in the position to try to help, and maybe like my younger brothers, it won't happen to them what happened to me. I don't want that to happen to my kids, and my peers, like I don't want it to happen to their kids or little brothers. So that's why I'm here, and I'm gonna help and give my insight, because I went through it.
How's everyone else doing? And a lot of people came home, and that's one thing that you guys didn't quite touch in the report, but a lot of people actually got time served, and a lot of people got less than 2 years, which really says a lot about the nature of their crimes. But
neighborhood now. Well, with the people that got bail and didn't get misdemeanors, I see that, I mean, the people that got bail and got misdemeanors, I see like a lot of difference between the people that got felonies and the misdemeanors. So the people with the misdemeanors is like, you can see them going on with their life, like, but the ones with the felonies is like really stuck. Like, they're stuck, like they don't know what to do and they don't have the education. So it's like they don't know, like all they know is the streets. So it's like, it's just a cycle, you know, and then I see like younger kids out there, so I'll invite them out and try to show them like better things. Like I throw an annual party up in Bridgeport at my school, so I'll bring the younger kids up to the school so they could like have hopes to go to college or something, you know. But it's still the same. It's the same. I mean, he took everybody. How it's the same? It's the same. And if it's the same, that means they'll come around again and take everybody again, you know. So we got to get to work. You can't let that happen. You can't let that happen. There's a lot of people, innocent people, like, all right, Bronx 120 gang. I'm in there with somebody's dad that I never met before. We conspired to do what if I never met you before? So why is he even here, you know? And that's happening. I mean, and I wanted to be a lawyer, to go to law school, and we in here with the people that can make some changes. So let's make some changes. Let's do something. Let's try.
So let's make some changes. Let me turn to you guys who have been working on this for a while. And maybe, Vidal, you can start by telling us a little bit of your story and then a little bit of the work you've been doing since then.
Oh, it's on right now. So my name is Vidal Guzman. I'm a community organizer for Just Leadership USA. A little bit about my story. I was homeless when I was 5, 6 years old. I started selling drugs at 8 and 9 years old. I became a high-ranking member of the Bloods at 14, 15 years old. 16 years old to 17, I was incarcerated on Rikers Island. I did 2 years. I was 18. I came home when I was 18 on probation, and I was incarcerated again at 19 till I was 24. I was in solitary confinement every 3 to 4 months. I've been home for 4 years, 4.5 years on gang parole. So I really wanted to first say that, you know, so people know where our path came from and what got me here. You know, this work, one of the things that I heard Kraig actually talked about is like certain neighborhoods are underfunded, over-incarcerated, and over-policed. And we know that, right? We know that certain communities, me doing my research, that where they are doing these gang raids, certain housing complex, their community centers are closed because of budget cut. Or communities where, you know, are the less funded in, right? Not having programs or after-school programs for people to come through, right? There's so many different things when I'm doing the Close Rikers Island campaign and being a part of that and organizing, is that when someone is gang-related or even part of a crew, incarcerating someone just enhance their gang involvement, right? And a lot of people really don't talk about that. You know, me being incarcerated at 16 and then being incarcerated at 19 is that the cycle of people learning of what they think they are, what their abilities of life and how far of what they can be in life is, you know, I can just be a gang member and this is my lifestyle. And in reality, I see that, you know, I see the abilities of people coming home and only thinking that this is the only life I can live. So we have a lot of people, and Brian Stevens said one of the most important things, that we're sending broken people to a broken system, people who have been broken by poverty, broken households, broken neighborhoods, broken communities. So the importance about when you talk about poverty, poverty is violence. People who are gang-related, people as myself who are gang-related, we are in survival mode. When the survival mode is the abilities to do anything, to put food on the table, to have a roof over your head, and to have clothes on your back. That is the hardest thing for a human being on an everyday basis, to fight for scrambles and pennies and nickels, knowing that our communities are really, when it comes to investments, they never go through black and brown communities. So when we talk about the gang database, it's like there's many different gang database, right? And different names, right? In London, in Chicago, in New York, you know, in Boston. You know, in Chicago, when we talked about it, the way that they kind of looked at the gang database, and the way that they, let me correct that, the way that they try to solve the gang issues in Chicago's in around 1975, 1985, let me correct that, was by demolishing buildings, and then from there thought that was going to solve the gang issues in Chicago. And then a couple years later, 10 years ago, they started closing public schools, and after they started closing public schools and turning them to charter schools, so people as kids who wasn't able to go to their local charter schools had to go to certain neighborhoods that was gang related, or certain neighborhoods that their neighborhood was beefing, and just got themselves back in that gang life that they didn't want to be a part of. So this work is important, but we know sending people, kids, to jails and prisons is not going to solve the issues. We know that a child's mind is not fully developed to 25, and our criminal justice system is really doing that. It's sending our kids to jail and prison without preparing them to come home.
And Taylonn, I mentioned earlier the Harlem 103 raid, and your story is very much connected to that. So maybe if you can tell everyone here about your children.
Well, I happen to be the father of Tayshawn Chicken Murphy. She was a high school basketball star that was killed in Grant Houses on September 11th, 2011. I'm also the father of Taylonn Jr., who was actually convicted of conspiracy in the big Harlem raid. Actually, I think the conspiracy case even had, the conspiracy indictment even had his sister on the indictment. So basically they convicted him of also attributing to killing his sister, which is, mind-boggling. I want to thank Babe for that great report. I want to thank Babe for just basically supporting a lot of the findings or a lot of the theories that we all had. I'm going to tell you this. I know it's a lot of faces out there that may be surprised, but let me tell you something. I'm not surprised one bit. I'm not surprised at all. I'm not surprised because I done watched the criminal justice system put together narratives. And what we have to do is we have to start combating those narratives. And the reason why I say they put together these narratives because I have a couple of people in the audience. Kay Davis, could you please stand up for a minute? That's Kathy Davis. She's my son's fiance, goes to see my son, been going to see my son since he's been locked up. Kathy actually works in a capacity for the federal government, is that correct? How about if I told you 48 hours ago, Kathy was accused of being a gang member? Am I lying, Kathy? She went to visit my son at Comstock Correctional Facility. My son got to Comstock Correctional Facility after being in the box since December for a minor altercation. See, when you're labeled a gang member, everything gets extremely amplified. So he had been in the box since December, is that correct? And Kathy had been writing him while he's in the box. She wrote him a letter, and in that letter she put LOL on the letter. When my son got out of the box, and 2 weeks ago got out of the box, right, from December, 2 weeks ago, and went to Comstock Correctional Facility. He was out in the yard at Comstock Correctional Facility. We'll get to how he got there. I'm trying to do short form. We'll get to how he got there. He's in Comstock Correctional Facility, and they did a search of his cell. They found letters that Kay sent to him with LOL on them. They told him that now he has to be on keep lock because she's sending him gang language. So he was on keep lock for 2 weeks. 48 hours ago, I had a long 48 or 70, well, a couple of days, few days. We had a long few days because since my son has this charisma to him, and he likes to help people like his dad. His dad been through a lot of things, but I see the traps that were set down, and I'm trying not to have other young people fall into those traps. My son is trying to do the same thing. We came up with a a program, 1 in, 2 out. K actually took some young people up there to see him, to deter them from entering into the criminal justice system. But that's another story. They ended up dragging my son, taking my son out in his underwear. Two correctional officers, state correctional officers, taking him out to the yard. Now, you know it's cold up there because it's cold down here. Taking him to the yard, and my son is asking them, like, yo, what's the problem? What's going on? You know, if I can help, I got a little influence. They dragged him to the box and threw him in the box and told him that, you know, he's going to stay in there until, you know, we get things straight, because something happened in the jail while he was on keep lock. Somebody got stabbed on the other side of jail or assaulted on the other side of jail when he was on keep lock. So I'm saying all this to say to you that these are narratives that are put together. How about if I tell you that it was a hearing, last year, June, right? How about if I tell you in that hearing, I spoke about my daughter's second trial. See, they talk about 4 trials I've been through, but I've been through 7 trials my whole life. My daughter had there was 2 trials in my daughter's case, her killers, 2 trials, and then my son's trial. So I've been through 7 jury trials. How about if I tell you in that second trial, a police officer got on the stand and said that he's seen a group of 3 individuals come out of the building. One came down looking like he brandished the firearm, looking like he had a firearm, then brandished a firearm in front of a group of other individuals. They asked him, what did he do about it? He wasn't allowed to answer that question. District attorney said, you know, we object. At that time, we was wondering why the district attorney was objecting, because we wanted to know answers. Because that same firearm is the same firearm that he took and walked across the street past 3 more buildings and killed my daughter. And that killing spurred a chain of events. A chain of events in Harlem that things could have been stopped before they was even started. But they were already being socially engineered from the beginning due to intimate domain. I don't know if anybody knows about intimate domain, things of that nature. You know, you have 2 major universities up there. One of them is an Ivy League school that is expanding their campus through a CBA agreement. I'm trying not to be so long, but it's just a lot of information that I must share.
We need it.
Intimate domain. So there's a lot of variables, you know, especially a lot of variables when in early 2000, it's about 8 years ago, 8 or 9 years ago, Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, came out with this report. And I look at Marquise, you know about this report, right? 6 steps on getting rid of black, brown, and poor. Step number 1, deplete their wealth. Whatever wealth they have, deplete it. Step number 2, keep their wages the same. So if you're depleting their wealth, keeping their wages the same, then what you do is what? Gentrification. You send up the housing prices where nobody can live, nobody can afford to live there, because their wages are still the same, and you're depleting their wealth, anybody that had any wealth. Step number 4, broken windows. Take away their money any way you can. Fine, fleece them. Step number 5, criminalize them. This is what's going on right now with the Bronx 120. This is what's been going on with the June 14 raids in Harlem. 3rd, make their children suffer. Most sinister. And it's happening. It's happening systematic. This is systemic. This is racism wrapped up in classism. We got to call it how we see it. Hey, since the time that chattel slavery began, we had chattel slavery, the Lantern laws, the black codes, segregation, counterpole, then biological warfare. Send all the coke, crack, dope, whatever else you could send in there to kill it. We got to kill the black messiah. And Nixon, and they admitted that that was what Nixon was doing. Then came the Super Predator. You know, these guys, Central Park 5, Super Predator. Then the Thug. Change the music, change the vibrations, make them thugs. Then the thugs. This day and age, now it's the gangbanger. Now everybody's gangbanger. What we have to do is we have to change the narrative. We have to break down the narrative. We have to show that these young men are not gangbangers. See, because if I go into my whole case, it'll take me all night with the things that were done to us. My daughter was killed and we stayed in the same building. My family stayed in the same building for 2.5 years. They said they was investigating this case before my daughter got killed for 2 years. So you telling me you watching young men, 14, 15, 16, even some as young as 11 and 12, run around, hurt each other and hit each other and shoot at each other and all this, and nobody stepped in to stop it? Parents wasn't even contacted, even though some parents knew. Because this has been a long feud in Manhattan since the beginning of the time. And the only thing that separates them two housing developments is 125th Street, the hottest area in the city. So you tell me in the hottest area in the city where people come and shop and people come just to see the Cotton Club and people come visit, this is allowed to go on. It has to be allowed to go on for a reason. And what is that reason? To add to the mass incarceration, to keep the machine going, to keep oiling this machine, the extension of slavery, to keep how they changed the 13th Amendment and made it like, hey, this is going to be the extension of slavery. The only way you could be, we could get slave labor out of you is to make you an inmate. This is systematically being done right now. I'm a product, I'm seeing it. My life is surrounded by it. My daughter's gone. My son is in prison, not for 5 years, not for 10 years, 48 years to life. In a case where they have no evidence, no physical evidence, no DNA evidence, the night of the homicide, they picked him up and let him go. Let him go. Let him go. No gun. You look at the videos, you don't see him with no pistol. I'm not going to say he's never been around anything because I'll be lying. No DNA evidence. All they have is some individuals that were also indicted on the same case, and flipped them and say, hey, look, man, this should get out of jail free card. Because I could believe anything. I could believe anything I want to believe now, especially after looking at that report. I could believe anything I want to believe now. Because if it looks like a duck, it sounds like a duck, 9 times out of 10, it's a duck. And it's been a duck. It's been a duck. It's been quacking like a duck. Man, there's so many things that they don't want me to go into. There's so many things they don't want me to say. They even denied my son poor man counsel. Even if I had $150,000, $100,000 for appeal, that's not my case. I'm his father. He's over 21 now. Mind you, when he got locked up, he was only 16. And they try to make this image that he was older than his sister. No, he was the baby. So they denied him poor man counsel. Right now, we're fighting to get him counsel because I don't have the money to pay. His mother don't have the money to pay. He definitely doesn't have the money to pay it. They even said in a motion, and these are things that you can research, in a motion that he was able to afford a private attorney. They know they gave him an 18B lawyer. The courts know it. So what's the issue? What is the problem? The problem is this. We must change. The problem is this. The good people that understand what's going on here and understand that we have to start playing on a fair and even playing ground and start having true justice for everyone. I understand that we was brought over here to work. I understand that we was brought over here as free labor. I understand that you have no need for us anymore, but maybe you do. Maybe you do, because I think somewhere down the line, it always happens. Just like they push drugs in our communities, you know, now it's the opioid epidemic. So now we need, we need services because it's getting at a different population of people, you know? Now it's white people that's out in the suburbs that's feeling that crunch. Is it gonna stop when they feel a crunch of this violence that's being manufactured? Because like Vidal said, violence is manufactured through poverty, and not only economic poverty, it's social poverty. Poor schools, poor outreach, poor mental health services. It's a combination of all these things intertwine, and it's not done by accident. It's done on purpose. You know, capitalism, they say, oh, you pull up your bootstraps, and I believe that. You don't pull up bootstraps and work. But it's easy for you to tell me to pull up my bootstraps and work when you lived off of my labor and my ancestors' labor for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. But I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to be too much longer because I know you're looking at me like, hey, tell you, hey, it's not your whole show, but I just had to let that out. And I'm about solutions. I'm very solution driven. When my daughter was killed, I went on a campaign of peace. A campaign of peace that even reached as far as Mother Africa. Stand up, brother. This is my brother Shakir. Shakir's from South Africa. Him and my other brother, Siyabongo, from South Africa, gave me a name, Doloxulu. It's Asazulu for peacemaker. So that's what I am. That's what's in my heart. I see souls. I don't see skin colors. I feel vibrations. I pray. I meditate, you know, and I see all of us as family, human race. Solutions. Stand up, you two. These are two of my peer mentors. Both of them have criminal records. Some of the stuff I tell you about them and things that they have done and the things that they're doing now. Fathers, both of them with one with a son, one with a daughter. Very proud of you. Jermaine actually wrote his own curriculum. Jail, just another ignorant lifestyle. Acronym. These are the raw gems that are in the community that we need to nurture, we need to cultivate, we need to support, we need to get behind, because they speak the language of their peers. These credible messages. These are Simba soldiers. Simba, acronym. Strong, intelligent minds building alliances. And that's what we're going to try to do. I keep dropping this paper. It must not want to stay with me. It must want to go back to you because this is your curriculum. Thank you. Thank you for your work. Proud of you. And we'll be pushing on to do some more things. And my thing is this, and I'm going to be honest with you. We have to get the right resources in the right people's hands that are able to transform lives. My life has been transformed. My life's been transformed because I've been where these young people been at. I've been where you've been at, brother. I've been on 4 trials. It's no lie. 4 trials. 4 trials just for having information. You dig into or not even information, just being around people. This has been, I'm almost, I don't want to tell you, I'm almost half a century. So 30 years ago, this was happening. Just in a different fashion, different shape, different form. You have to take that energy, take your experience, and undo what's being done. And I offer you guys, and ladies and gentlemen, and to just look at my case, look at my son's case. Hopefully, Babe can help me get the case opened back up. It's funny because my son is even convicted of a robbery where there was 4 people that robbed somebody. He got the max on the robbery. The other 4 guys that actually, even though the robbery was suspect, because they said that they took only 6. The guy had $200, and they only took the increments of 20s, or they only took the $100 bill, or they only took the increments of 20s, whatever. all 4 guys that was with him on the camera, and they ran. You could see him run and then come back, and you could tell that they kept running. You know, whether they was chasing the guy or whatever. All of them got probation. All of them got probation. My son, because he took it to trial, because he said, nah, I'm not going to let you, what's his name? They said, we got to penalize him. And let me just say this. What was funny about the indictment, too, my son's indictment, they listed all these names of different people. The 2 individuals that killed my daughter were not on the indictment. And I don't have no harm. I don't feel no way by saying that because I reached across the aisle to their mother to make peace. The mother of the young man that killed my daughter, I reached across the aisle to make peace. So I don't feel no ways of saying that. But there's a lot of information out there. Like I said, I'm trying to give you the short version. I just wanted to show some solutions. I just want to show some examples. And with that, you know, I thank you for having me. And I'm sorry I've been so long-winded.
We'll come back to you. We got more.
Yeah, all right.
No, but one thing you mentioned that I think is important and is also relevant to this case is that the case in the Harlem raid was being built before your daughter was even killed. Like, police were watching this case a couple years before she was killed. And in the Bronx case, we know that the conspiracy was alleged to have started 9 years before the actual raid, when like the average age of those that ended up getting caught in the raid was like 14, and the younger kids were 9 and 10. And all those years where all of this community work could have been going on, all of this, alternatives that I hope at some point we talk about could have been going on. The police and prosecutors were building that case. And you mentioned that a little bit at the beginning of your presentation, Babe, but can you talk to us about how do you build a conspiracy case like that, and what does that do to friendships and relationships, and how were people's, social media messages used, and like really like, how can you kind of, everybody's neighbors, everybody knows each other, everybody's in the same social networks. Like, what this case did really was criminalizing people being friends with each other.
That's what the case does. I mean, it's pretty remarkable how thin the cases are and how, I didn't talk at all about the two trial cases, but one of them was convicted 90% because he was a rapper and he sang a song that was probably about a particular killing, but just singing a song, that was taken as a confession. They take social media and say, see, they're bragging about it. They interpret whatever they say. And in a lot of cases, there's barely anything. In the other trial I saw, each one of them, I honestly think, if you took them out of the RICO conspiracy, they were triable. They call me conceited, but I think that's a trial that I could have won without the conspiracy charge. But they bring in everything. Taylonn Murphy Jr.'s trial, the reason why I haven't helped yet is because the paperwork is this big, and it's four pages per paper. They bring in everything that's happened. In one of the two trials, this guy wasn't on social media. He wasn't a gang member, but they used somebody else's chat where they were talking about, yo, I want to get some weed, and in the middle of it they said, Loso's out. And this was supposed to mean that this was the corroboration of the cooperating witness who said he was selling weed to the gang. It was, these words are just taken out of context. They executed about 100 search warrants for Facebook. They get everything, tens and thousands of pages of documents that the lawyers, the single lawyers can't really manage, but they go through it and they come into court with, 2 or 3 words here or conversations there. And there's, no sense that people also code switch. I'm in college, but I'm texting with my friend. I'm going to be like, hey, yeah, I could sell an ounce of marijuana, no problem. People brag or like things because of social pressure. The use of social media is incredibly frightening. And in our advocacy work and work with communities, we're actually going around trying to say, like, don't use social media. they may be watching, they will certainly collect it all, and it's a real problem because you can't be a kid. I mean, essentially, none of us would allow the NYPD to look at our children's social media. None of them would let, what back in my day, it was phone calls, et cetera. If you went back to any of our childhoods and pulled that stuff out, it would be devastating. And that's one of the really worrisome things, though, because we're looking back 2, 3, 4 years. So you're a different person. It's obscene to go and grab up something about a conversation someone who's 19 had when they were 17. It's obscene.
You look like you wanted to jump in, Afrika, right?
I think that you were going to ask this question, how does it impact communities? But I have so many examples, and I'll start by saying I think that just as a woman, like who you associate with, for me in my case, I was dating someone at the time. They started building this case when I was 14, 15. I was indicted when I was 17, and it lasted until I was 19. But the effects continued even now, but even after I graduated college. For example, I'll name drop the bank. Chase Bank canceled my bank because there's a clause in everything you sign, and it was a character clause, and I violated their character clause 5 years after my case. So this was 2011. I graduated college in 2016. They canceled my bank because someone did some research and found that my stuff was in the media, was on the front page, and they're like, well, you were in a gang, this is serious, and that violates our character clause. And they wouldn't tell me why they canceled my bank. I had to flag an investigation, and finally some senior VP from Chase called me and told me, and I was frustrated, and I actually just found out that I got this Fulbright award, this prestigious grant. So I'm on the phone like, I just got a Fulbright, basically like, F you. Like, but at the time, being 22, I'm thinking like, that's messed up. I got a new bank, whatever. But then I'm thinking, is that gonna affect me getting a mortgage? Is that gonna affect housing applications? Getting loans for other things? How does that affect me in the future? And 22, I'm not thinking about that. But being 25 now and seeing my future, that really scares me. I was fired from jobs illegally because I was never technically convicted. Fired from jobs because I lied on my application. I never lied. The question states, have you ever been convicted? No, I was not. And then there's this constant back and forth. Denied fellowships, denied other things, having to, I already had to work twice as hard because of just being poor, being a woman of color. But then with, like your dad was saying, like with the felony, with the case, and then it being in the media and the way the media wrote it from prep school to prison, I'm carrying guns, is 20 times as worse. So it was a lot of rejection and a lot of working hard to constantly prove myself. I could never just be mediocre after my arrest. I always had to not only be the top student, I had to have the top things to counter everything I'd been through. And that's just personally, professionally. Personally, I was told when some of my co-defendants came home not to follow them on social media because a detective told one of the lawyers, like, oh, we see she's friends with this person again, liking pictures. A detective on my case was stalking my LinkedIn. I'm not sure if he knew that LinkedIn shows you who views your profile. And I was like, why are you all up on me? I hope you see I'm doing good. Other jobs I've worked, detectives have come to that job and said, like, someone was like, oh, you don't remember me, but I was a detective on your case. I'm like, do you want ketchup with your fries? Get out of my face. Like, so things like that, because I've remained in my Harlem community. So having to choose between friend groups and then telling one of my close friends, I was like, I can't follow you on Instagram. And then at first I was like, I hope he doesn't feel the type of way. He was like, nah, I understand. He's like, I honestly just delete my Instagram. It's okay. I don't take it personal. But I'm thinking, as a teacher, I've been both in impoverished neighborhoods and in affluent neighborhoods, and we don't police students with privilege. We don't police white children. We don't tell them not to follow these people and not to dress this way. We let them dye their hair these colors, but when we do it, is gang affiliated or it's unprofessional, it's inappropriate, we let them be them. We even let them be us, and that's okay. But when it comes to us, everything is policed. And me being 25, I am distanced from my case and I'm different, but I still feel like I have to prove to people that I'm not 15 and I'm not 17, and yes, I was in love with someone like that. And then people ask questions like, as the woman, why didn't you deter him from that, or as if it's my responsibility. So I flag that again as being a woman. It is rare in these gang cases, but women and families are impacted from visiting. When you go visit people, you're flagged. When you write letters, you're flagged. When you pick up phone calls, you're flagged. You will be investigated too. So now you have to think, how do I affect other people? And I even joke with some of my friends, like, I'm not the one you want to commit a crime. Like, if you're going to do something illegal, I'm not the one, because I have priors. And it's a joke, but it's seriously, like, still seeing police officers, or in college, even campus safety, I couldn't even enjoy my 4 years because I'm thinking if someone gets caught drinking underage, they're going to send it to the judge and I'm going to violate probation. That's not fun. So in terms of it affecting life and community, I'm impacted for the rest of my life on an institutional, personal level, you know, from wanting to get loans and jobs and stuff. So even just walking around my neighborhood, you know, they claimed I was part of the 137th Street gang. I live on 138th Street. There's a corner store and there's a Jimbo's that I go to every single day. So even when I'm on that block, I think to myself, don't stand outside too long, or be careful being around there. I still just can't live and walk. So, I mean, of course I still see people, I say hi and I'm friendly, but I'm so nervous around police and I'm anxious and I'm like, I just don't want them to think that they literally can say anything. And I know that for me, someone that has had the privilege to be distanced from the case and gone to college and worked somewhere and all of those things and not have a felony, that's still my experience. I think about constantly the people that don't have that network and the affluence and the degree and the ability to code switch the way that I do. I think about that all the time. For the people that don't have that, how are they being treated? What jobs are they not getting? Can they even apply for credit cards? Can they build their credit? Are they going to be able to move? No. And that's scary. It's not just an arrest. It's not just a news article. It's affecting every single aspect of our lives on multiple levels. And this is me, the affluent one. So imagine the one that doesn't have those things. Think about that. That's scary to me.
Did you want to respond?
I totally agree. In my neighborhood, like, after what happened, you got the real young kids, like, they don't really understand because they following the rap music. They think, like, it's cool what happened. But then you got people my age, they don't want to be around me. Like, I got people, like, I went to school with, and they probably, like, scared, like, just because of, like, what they put on the news. And I wasn't able to see the news, so, but I could just imagine, like, and I'm just with you in class. Like, I got 2 classmates, I mean, that came from UB, they played basketball, and I'm sure, like, I was a grad coach, so they probably looking at me like, wow, like, you just got hit with John Gotti charges. And I'm like, yo, I didn't do that, you know? And so, like, they are scared in my neighborhood to do anything. Like, not scared, but nervous of police. And, I mean, when they pull me over, I keep my hands up. They tell me, put my hands down. I'm not putting them down. Like, I know I'm clean. Just leave me alone, you know? So, like, I understand completely. Like, it affects my whole entire neighborhood. I'm talking about everybody's parents, aunts, they family in Florida, wherever they come from, they family in college, like, everything, like, everything. It's like a cloud over my neighborhood, my whole neighborhood. So then you got the people that's gonna come home. I mean, some of them might not be happy with what's going on. Now they going back to poverty, and the war starts all over again. I mean, so I feel you all the way.
One thing that, Babe, you mentioned at the beginning, and that I'd like all of you guys to think about is, you know, this idea that this crackdown on gangs in New York in particular started around the time of the civil rights lawsuits against the stop and frisk practice. And we saw a lot of outrage in New York around stop and frisk, and a lot of people that were rightly outraged, obviously, but it was something that was happening out in the open. It's something people were seeing and could kind of relate to. And so we saw this really public outcry that I think helped that lawsuit and helped those changes. With gang policing, we don't really see that. And part of it is that we don't really know a whole lot about it. We don't have any transparency about the gang database. We don't see what happens in these cases past the initial headlines. And part of it is the gang label itself, which makes it so much easier for people to just dismiss it. It's like, oh, if you're connected to gangs in some way, then you probably had it coming, you deserve what you got. And so how do we start challenging that? And I'll throw that to everyone, and you can answer it in your own ways. But on the one hand, we need more information about this, how this actually works. And on the other hand, how do we change the narrative?
She could give you the narrative of the state, you know, like, and he can too. The state, I don't know if it was federal, or you probably could give the narrative. I could give you the narrative of the feds. Now, with the RICO, what they did with me is, okay, I'm coming in there with a clean record, and I know I ain't do what they saying that I did, and we got public record of like them saying that I was shot trying to shoot people, and then like 2 different occasions, but in reality, I never been shot. So what I think they should do is, I don't know if it's the lawyer's job or if it's the judge's job or prosecutor to really investigate what's going on, because I know they didn't investigate what was going on with me. They just like said anything, and we couldn't fight it. Like, it was like I watch a lot of Law and Order and stuff. Like, I always say this, like, it was not like Law and Order, like, at all. You understand? Like, I'm looking, my mom is crying. I'm looking at myself because I don't know what's going on. Like, it's like out-of-body experience, you feel me? And for them to say that I did that in a courtroom where it's, like, so pretty, like this, and you would think it's, like, over-the-top professional, and I'm coming from college, and I'm like, yo, this is not happening. I got to get to my finals tomorrow, and it, like, I feel like people should look deeper into it, because, yeah, the Bronx 120 gang, but what happened to that dude that was about to get his master's? What's up with him? If anybody would have looked at that the first day I got arrested, I probably would have my master's right now, because people like you guys would have probably helped me, and, like, my lawyer ain't really, like, helped me, you know?
And it was actually the judge that
Yeah, the judge.
overturned your...
I mean, I go in there expecting 5 years. I already copped out, did my PSI. It's mandatory 5 years. My grandma's telling me, oh, pray for better. No, grandma is 5 years. So I walk in there, and, like, I'm just, like, basically like, yo, give me my time, send me to Kentucky, wherever I gotta go, like, because I'm trying to go home, you know, like 5 years, let's get it going. Before I could even, I already wrote a speech, cursing them out politely. You know, I got my education. Long speech. So I sit down, and I'm ready to, like I don't got no manners, I'm not polite. You know, I come in there looking around, I'm on jail time, like jail time. 2 years, like everything, brainwashed. Nothing mattered at all. Like, all right, so I get there, see my family, they said, don't turn around. So I'm turning around on purpose, because this might be the last time I see them in a while. But, like, I felt something was gonna happen, because while I'm turning around, nobody's not saying anything to me. So I'm like, okay, God's working already, because usually they'll come make me turn around. So the judge started basically telling the prosecutor, like, yo, like, what is this? Like, basically. So he's like, this is injustice. I can't be no injustice in my courtroom. This don't make no sense. And I'm looking around like, yo, what's going on? Like, after 2 years, you mean, like, you could have helped me 2 years ago. I would have had my degree, you know? Like, I could be a lawyer. I could have been you. You understand? Like, I wrote that. Like, I could have been you if you look. So I feel like if they look into it, like, just you see it on the news and you see a bunch of black kids getting chained up, you probably got 10 of them that really didn't do nothing. Like, really, though, like, and you don't have enough power to even battle the lies. Like, not even my hospital records could have saved me, and I didn't get shot. So, like, that would have evaded the whole statement. But, I mean, so I feel like everybody should take a better look into it. The judge shouldn't wait 2.5 years to see what's going on. Like if you
also in
charge me.
Kraig's case, he actually, Kraig's family actually managed to come up with the bail, and then the same judge had said that, ended up saying, agreeing with the prosecutor, saying you were a danger to society or whatever. I think, and like as you can see, like in the documentary, I don't really go to that much detail about this because Kraig's case is very complicated, and I think part of the problem with the gang policing issue and the gang narrative is that these are complicated cases with family ties, and if you're from that community, you know what's going on, you know what's the reality. But I think we have a society and media that's so in love with innocent until you're supposed to be innocent proven guilty, but that's the other way around. And like stories really like the completely innocent victim, and that's really, I think, part of the problem. Like why this criminal justice reform like so often centered on like innocence project type work, which is great and really important, but once the story gets more complicated, maybe someone dealt weed, maybe someone made a small mistake when they were younger, like everyone does, this becomes like a gang thing and everybody becomes scared. And that's part of the really upsetting thing about this narrative, and I think that's why there needs to be more stories told like Kraig's and Vidal's and Taylonn's and Afrika's, like, because people's lives can't fit into like this perfect fairy tale if you're from a certain community. And I think,
Yeah. No, baby, we're gonna jump in.
I really have to jump in because these cases are impossible to defend. They don't tell you what your client's charged with. How can they help you on day one? These guys have been in a conspiracy for 9 years. She had the best lawyer ever. I don't know how long it took her to get it. And one problem is, of course, you get assigned counsel. They use 2/3 of the assigned counsels, and the folks with less of a record often get the less good defenders. Like when I first called a few of my defender buddies, who are the lawyers I would call if I got in trouble, I say, what's going on? Each one of those guys had the 5 guys who murdered someone. But the folks who are barely involved are getting lawyers who are under-resourced, maybe good, maybe bad. They are not given any information, and the judges are not standing up for anyone. That same judge refused Kraig's bail at the beginning. He was granted bail by the magistrate judge because no record, because college student, MBA, working on his MBA. He was granted bail, and then the same judge who 2 years later, oh no, I can't have injustice in my courtroom, who just railroaded and was entirely complicit. You want 2 years of speedy trial time waived? Great. You don't tell people what they're charged with? Fine. You give a narrative that everybody's indicted for murder? You didn't hear anything from any of those saying what happened here. Like the prosecutors and the judges are part of this problem. This case shows it. I don't know if the prosecutors did not know that half those people were not gang members and just believed the NYPD. And this is a huge problem with gang policing. Gang units are the most corrupt units in the country and have been from Rampart to NYPD. They have more complaints. The cops that testified in these cases has cost all of us $250,000 and more. The jurors don't get to know that, and the judges are saying, okay. They didn't admit culpability. It was settled without admission. So the judges are complicit. They made one good decision after thousands of unfair decisions. So I just had to jump in. His judge did something okay, saying, well, actually, you're charging him with conduct that had nothing to do with this conspiracy as part of the conspiracy, and that is technically not part of the conspiracy. Hey, you found one thing. But there were 2 misdemeanors, 115 felonies out of this. Felonies. And they're letting people say, yeah, I sold weed. I'm not even a gang member. But altogether, it probably added up to 50 kilos. It's pretty despicable, and the judges are a problem. And defense lawyers, unfortunately, are not in a position, they can't get the information. The judges are not ordering it. And if they do get it, it's hundreds of thousands of pages. And how do you don't even know what your client's charged with. So what this takes me to is what we have to do with this is more of what we're doing. It's the public, we need to change the public's mind, which feels really, really hard, but stop and frisk used to be very popular. Broken windows policing used to be incredibly popular. We need to get to the public. One thing that I will say about the findings of this report is it is nice, it's a silver lining that there's so many non-gang members and so many people with no records, because they are shooting themselves in the foot. If they kept it to 10 or 12 and got everybody on a felony, but they're still, you hear this in Queens. There was a shooting, MS-13 right on the subway, supposedly. One guy shot, they knew it. He was being actually threatened by the other people. There's like no self-defense in these cases. It's like, well, they were shooting at me, but it's like in a victim, they use, he was shot to show he was in a gang. It's crazy. But, we had that in Queens, and not only did they arrest the one, but then they sweep up 5 others and his friends. So we need to change the public narrative. This helps a little bit in showing that, like stop and frisk, it's too broad, but as Stephanie points out, we fetishize the completely innocent. Every time I get a call from press, can you get me one who's completely innocent? And most of them are like, yeah, no, I hung out, I smoked weed, I sold nickel bags to, feed myself when I was in the homeless shelter, whatever. We would not criminalize, and if, I don't know, but if you looked at my age, 14 to 24, and held me responsible for what my friends did, you could definitely convict me of a felony. I confessed. There you go.
Can I add something?
And I want to bring in Priscilla really quick, because one thing that, part of changing the narrative is actually getting the information out there, and it's very hard to get that information. There's very little transparency about this. You guys filed FOIA requests that were denied. You based this on a ton of court records, and because it was federal court, some of them were like more accessible than others would have been, but it was very hard. And I know Legal Aid have started their own website where they're allowing people to basically file for public records requests for themselves to see if they are on the gang database, and those are getting denied. So how do we get that information that's out there? What's out there that we don't have, and what was your process? Because you did a lot of the research for the report.
It was a process. I should say all the documents that I looked at are publicly available on PACER, so Public Access for Court to Court Electronic Record Service. And you can download 10 cents a page. If you have access to Bloomberg, that fee is waived. I spent nearly the last 2 years going through all related court documents, from government defense sentencing submissions to any transcripts for bail, plea, or sentencing hearings for each person in the Bronx 120. Some documents just weren't available, either because they were never filed or because they weren't made available to the public. Sentencing transcripts in particular, sometimes it was months later before they were made available, months after the hearing had happened already. And at first glance, it's easy to get lost in the sheer volume of paperwork and all the accusations against those indicted. I saw the same narrative of violence and murder, the same social media references literally copied and pasted at the start of every sentencing memo, even if that information had nothing to do with the defendant that was being talked about in that document. So a lot of it was digging through all of this that takes the time that most people don't have to sit and figure out. I had to talk to Babe for a lot of it to figure out all the specifics, particularly where there was ambiguity. So for instance, I might be looking at one document where the prosecution's saying, look at all the times this individual was arrested, and then only to find as I dig through more documents that none of those arrests resulted in convictions, and so this person actually has no criminal record. So does all this information say something about all these alleged criminal acts that this person did, or instead is it reflecting the height of stop and frisk policing,
the widespread use of discretionary arrests, which is particularly troubling if now these arrests are being used to build cases against these individuals years later. So I mean, yeah, the process is hard. I'm not sure how to make that more accessible. In terms of things we still don't know, I mean, there's a lot we still don't know. One thing that we wanted to look at were who had civil cases pending. So we were wondering if the NYPD might be using these gang conspiracy cases to retaliate against people who had filed civil complaints against them. And we know that at least one of the two people who chose to go to trial had a civil case pending at the time of the indictment. And then there's still a lot. I mean, Babe mentioned social media. There's a lot unknown. Some of the references in the documents were vague and unspecified. Yeah, I think, I mean, the last point, I guess, in terms of changing the narrative too, we've heard firsthand accounts about how this affects people's lives, entire communities. I think we still have to think about accumulation and how these consequences might be compounding, not just for individuals and communities, but entire communities across entire cities, across the whole country, and look at how people might have shared, you know, psychological consequences, shared legal and financial dispossession, shared traumatic experiences with police, because then we can paint sort of a bigger picture of the way gang policing is working to criminalize entire groups of people all over the country.
I want to turn to your side. I know there's two more people here. How do we change the narrative?
Yeah, so I do want to answer something because I think it's important for people to know. We can't forget about people who are gang related, right? People who lived in that lifestyle, people who all they knew their whole life is what they seen around them. A lot of our people mirror what they see around them, the survival mode, right? I grew up in communities. I also grew up in a community that, you know, 10 blocks away from me is called Lincoln Projects. You know, a friend of mine, we was talking yesterday. One of my friends actually just came home from the feds. They did 2 Fed raid and also did a state raid, right? And when I look at that, you know, some of the individuals that I grew up with was 13, 14 years old. And imagine them going to 2 Fed raids and then coming, you know, getting through a state raid. And imagine all that going through someone's system, like going through their life, right? I think for us is really getting to the root causes of why people are joining gangs in the first place, right? Like the most crucial part of a person joining a gang is 10 to 13. And as Babe talked about, is like 1% of people who are gang related actually cause crime. And what is the cause of crime? You know, why are people even doing what they're doing? There comes to a certain point of why this is happening in the first place. Because when we talk about black and brown, you know, when we talk about black and brown, we're thugs. But when we talk about white gangs and the Hell Angels, they're idols. When we talk about the mafia in Brooklyn right now, they got a museum. They're not thugs. They're idols. So when it comes to black and brown gangs, it's different. And the problem is, like, people don't talk about the history when the Bloods and the Crips first started, right? The Bloods and the Crips first started, it was supposed to be a branch off of the Black Panthers, right? And what happened was that the brain of the Black Panthers was killed in the US organization. So they wasn't able to teach the Bloods and the Crips the real roots of what exactly it was created in the first place. In LA, when LA first started creating gangs, black people grouped up together because they was tired of getting jumped by white people in Compton. So let's get there at the root causes why people even started gangs in the first place. You know what I'm saying? And why it got where it got at now. The same thing that Taylonn Murphy talked about, underfunding communities, over-policing community, and over-incarcerated community became the poverty of people trying to survive every single day. So when we talk about gangs, we talk about human beings that all they knew is what they mirror around them. Yes, I was blood. Yes, I was a person who was out there, but that's all I knew. I didn't have no role models. I didn't have no blueprint, the blueprint of how to be successful, how to return back to society. I was traumatized. I was dealing with PTSD. I watched my friends get killed in front of me. So there's so many different things. Let's never forget about the people who are gang-related right now, that's standing on a block, that don't know how to sit through a job interview, how to tie a tie. Let's not forget about them individuals that all they seen is their friends getting incarcerated more than going in college. Let's never forget about them. Let's never forget about the individual that all they know is how to sell drugs. Let's never forget about the individual that's standing on the corner and all they know is how to stand on the corner. There's comes to a certain mind, there are people who are gang related, there are innocent people, right? But black and brown people, we are always innocent. No, and why I say that? Because we have a system that works to oppress us and get us where we at now. So everyone who's black and brown, as long as poverty is over our head and under our feet, we are innocent to proving guilty. I am a gang member, and I will talk as a person that experienced what it means to live in over incarcerated, over in police, and over incarcerated communities. It's important for people to not forget about them, because there's people right now who are doing 60, 70 years who became my role models when I first came home. Those was the individual that was doing 25 to life who taught me a couple things. He said, and his name was Dredd, he had 35 years already in, and I met him at Green Correctional Facility. He said, people, and the reason why he said this, because people kept returning back to Green. Same people kept returning back, kept getting reincarcerated. He said, people are scared to fail. When a man or a person who's coming home and feel the feeling of failing, they're scared to feel it again. He said, people are scared to actually fail. So, and when he told me that, I never understood what that actually meant. And this was from an individual who was gang related, who was well educated. And one of the things he said, while I'm here incarcerated forever, because America actually incarcerate way too many and give our people way too much time and call that justice. One of the things he said, and this is before I went to solitary confinement because I didn't listen to him. He said, believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. I landed in solitary confinement. I was in solitary confinement, and I was looking at a little dirty mirror, and I had to ask myself, how did I get here? What got me here? How can I get myself out of here? 7 years of my life passed, and I had a woke moment. That's what people that have been incarcerated say. I had the moment where I woke up, and I said, this was done on me. And when I came home, I heard many no's, many, many no's, until I heard that yes. But there's many people who are not criminals, are just did not find the light at the end of the tunnels. Our communities are really underfunded, over-incarcerated, and over-policed. The resources that our people are needing has to be met. So when we talk about what exactly is going on now, I survived the stop and frisk. I know how it feels to be put on the wall. But what I know is that as the population of people being incarcerated and as harsh cases are happening, that police has to protect their budget. They have to think about what exactly is the next term or the next thing to keep our budget as big as possible. And this is what it was, the gang database. When the stop and frisk stopped, the gang database grew. And I was incarcerated in 2010, my second time being incarcerated. I seen every person that I seen on that list being with me on Rikers Island. And the reason why I got involved in this, not because I was blood, is because everyone I heard getting football years, 30, 40 years with no evidence for just calling someone. And being 20 years old, being 18, being 17 years old, the scariest thing is being 16 years old, being in an upstate prison 8 hours away from the city. This country has done what it wanted to do. Incarcerate our youth, and what it has done is did what it wanted to do. And we can't let that happen anymore. We have to attack the police budget, because this gang database is not working. It's not protecting our neighborhood from nothing. What we need is resources and meet everyone's basic needs and economy needs. Everyone that are gang related or gang members are entrepreneurs, and I believe that. Because we have the abilities to organize, we have the abilities to think about what is different, we have the abilities to think deeper about actions, we have the abilities to believe what we want to believe. And I would tell you that for myself. I'm a community organizer. I organize 400 to 500 people to come to rallies and protests. And I educate people and empower them to believe in themselves. And a lot of people that I work with are speaking around the country. I wrote articles at AM New York. I've been featuring Revoke TV with Diddy's. We have to find the end of the tunnel for everyone who is gang-related, not gang-related, or living in communities that are underfunded, over-incarcerated, and over-policed communities. So let's never forget about them.
Taylonn, I know you want to say something. And after that, we're going to open it up to questions from the public.
I'm going to be real brief. I'm going to be very brief, very brief. I know everybody's like, thank you. We thank you, be brief. I don't think it's so much about changing the narrative, because I think everybody's here and everybody that's in this room really wants to change this narrative. Everybody sees that the danger of doing this, because then, you know, it could be another group of individuals, you know, that suffer, you know, this type of prosecution, so to speak. I think it's more about changing the narratives and controlling the narrative. And how do we do that? First, we must go out. Babe's report actually helps that, because we can show in numbers what is systematically going on. Once we can show in numbers, we're speaking their language, what's systematically going on, because you cannot deny what's happening. You cannot deny that these bodies have been incarcerated and the reasons why they've been incarcerated. And these reasons are really not even reasons at all. Secondly, after we do that, like Vidal said, we have to start building stronger communities. And building strong communities mean that we have to build strong communities with everyone. Everyone has to chip in. Everyone has to come together and, again, start uplifting one another. And I'm talking about the everyday average person that goes to work, tries to make a better living for their children. I'm not talking about the 1%, because it's only a small portion of people that are pushing these buttons, pulling these strings, creating these dynamics to cause the things that happen in the community. Like Vidal said, resources, lack of resources. You know, like we said before, social poverty. See, I know once we can get social poverty together, economic poverty will come. Because then you start bartering, then you start trading, then you start being entrepreneurs, then you start thinking different. When you start thinking different, when you think rich, you are rich, you know? And we have to start eating different foods. Food for our mind. I'm done with this. We have to start eating different foods. Food for our mind, food for our spirit, and food, mental foods. So with that, I mean, and this is part of eating good foods and digesting them. So
Can I just
Speaking
add,
of food.
can I add one really quick thing? So your point about community and coalition building, I'll add that they're surveilling the gang database. These are blueprints that have existed to surveil Muslims, to surveil immigrants detained in ICE, Latin Americans, Latinx people. This is something that has occurred over maybe a century, maybe a little bit less. But my point in saying that is community is important. That was very important in my case with my church. And Babe, you highlighted it. Community buy-in is very important. We have to use the tools they're using against us. We have to they're playing with chess. We have to figure out what pieces they're using. If they're using social media, we need to use social media, control that narrative. But also we have to coalition build and figure out how, if this is affecting people, you know, immigrants or our Muslim brothers and sisters, we need to figure out how we can talk about strategies that they've used, because there have been cases that have been brought against other communities that have been surveilled, other identities, LGBTQ. It's not just, you know, black and brown bodies and gangs. This is just, this database taken from other data that is existing, that the FBI, the CIA, that ICE uses. They're using some of this gang data to deport people in Long Island City, in Queens. That's one of their cases that CCR is actually litigating. All that to say, I think that's important for us to do as well. We have to reach out to other allies, not just white allies, but other allies of color, because there are strategies that they're using. There's cases that they've won. And one of the biggest ways America wins is by siloing and separating oppressed people. So they'll keep black people, poor oppressed black people in this group, and then poor Latin black people in this group, poor Muslim, separate them, right? Persecute us all in different ways. But if we come together, and because there's strength in numbers and people of color do outnumber these, gentrifiers and whatnot, if we do come together and share our knowledge and what we've been through and show this unified front of not just black and brown, but also different faiths and different sexual identities, that will scare the shit out of them because they don't expect that. They really don't. So I also want to highlight community and coalition building as a big solution to this problem, I believe, and not letting those people speak in those movements, but allowing them, or speak for the people affected, but allowing them, giving them resources and the tools to empower them to do so themselves.
On that note, let's actually open it up to questions from you guys, and let's see how much time we have. Not a ton of time, so.
10 minutes and there's food outside, so anyone who has to leave, please eat first, because, yeah.
All right, yeah, go ahead. Yep. And yes, speak up.
I'm going to, damn. Okay, FCI Danbury, class of 1981. I'm going to frame my question, even though I was going to make a statement, Taylonn. And the thing is that Taylonn spoke about the duck, and I was riffing on the question of duck. And I think we need to pose the question to you in terms of, like, there are two terms I think we need to use to reframe the narrative. First question, the first term that we need to actually confront is the question genocide. And I'm not using that in a rhetorical sense, okay? Everything I heard so far comes down to one thing, genocide. Because genocide is when the policies of a government, okay, prevents a people from thriving or even surviving. The other question, now let me backtrack a little bit. All these things that people were talking about today took place under which president? Obama. Okay, let's be clear about that, okay? And now we're looking at who? Trump. So the other terminology that I want to introduce and have you consider is the question of fascism, okay? So I'm not going to go on and on, but at the same time, I think this is necessary for us to grasp, because I'm coming from a perspective that this system is worthless, is unreformable, and that no matter how and what you think about it, the professor was correct. All these people are complicit in it. And frankly speaking, we need a revolution. But aside from that, let's look at these two terminologies, because it's going to have to challenge us towards one solution and one conclusion. Thank you.
Do you want to get a few questions together, and then you guys can all answer them as we go? So there was someone, yeah, up front, yeah.
Me or someone else?
You.
Oh, okay. Hi, Professor, this is for you. So we know the rate of recidivism in this country is really high, and I'm wondering if in your report you found that, like how many defendants actually went back to prison after they were released?
Do you want me to answer that right away? I mean, I don't, let's get a couple more, and then we can maximize. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, so I was really impressed, and this is an incredible report. I just wanted to ask if there was a way that, looking at this, the problem that I see is that the question of innocence, or whether or not the people who have been rounded up by the police are, whether this is like a worthy thing to be doing, like whether they should have been wrapped up into the system. But I think the problems are the axioms like that dictate this question, like the ones to do with whether they have gang affiliation, whether that is even, sorry, this is not really making a lot of sense, but whether or not the questions that we're asking are the right questions to be asking, and whether we need to combat it with other means.
And yeah, there's just two more. Let's just take them all and then answer them all at once. So yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. This is great. I just wanted to hear from all of you, but as many as you guys have time for. Your responses to the discussion the other day on Monday, there was that like marathon of CNN town halls, and the Democratic candidates were asked about voting rights for incarcerated, and one of them said that he believed and that people who are incarcerated should have the right to vote, and everyone else thought that there should be a conversation. One of them was like, no, and I was kind of shocked, and maybe that was naive, but I just wanted to hear people's thoughts on how you respond to people, because apparently a lot of people think it's okay, or politicians, to say that if you're in jail, you don't deserve the right to vote, and maybe afterwards, sure, but when you're in jail, you don't, and it kind of was mind-boggling, so your response.
One last one, and then I'll summarize them all, and you guys can.
Sorry, I'll make it quick. My question is for anybody essentially to answer. I know a lot of people here are college students, undergrads, law school students who are young and looking to get involved and make a difference based on the experiences that you've come and shared with us. So my question is, for anybody who would care to answer, what do you think the best way and the best things that people like in a position like myself or all the other students here are going forward, what are the best ways that we can do to help people who have found themselves in experiences like a lot of you shared? What do you think career-wise we could be doing? What could we be doing in our off time when we're not in the classroom? Like, what are the best ways that you think young people who care about these issues and want to get involved, that do have the privilege of being in educational institutions like many of us do right now, what are the best ways that we can get involved? How can we help? What should we be looking to do in our careers? Anybody who can speak to those things, I would really appreciate it.
Right, so we got fascism, recidivism, voting rights for the incarcerated. Are we asking the right questions, and what do we do next? Who wants to take that?
So I think I want to really answer the abilities of the voting right? You know, last year my first time voting on parole, right? That was my first time ever voting. I was like happy as shit. It was like, and I think for me, I felt really happy to be a part of the community, right? But I want to really say this, America is the only place that takes people's rights. When you go to other European countries, when someone is incarcerated and returned back to society, their rights is not took as a human being, right? The human being of voting, the human being of being part of society. So when I think of voting is really important, not just someone that's incarcerated, from the idea of like, what exactly does it mean for you to return back to society? Who is talking about the conditions that they care about that you're returning back to society? Let's remember this. A lot of these people who are coming home are really coming home to our society. So their thought to return back to society is important. So, yeah.
One thing I'll say actually about that is, everybody's talking about the elections all the time, but if you can vote, vote in district attorneys' races. Prosecutors are the single most powerful element of this whole system we've been talking about. And we have elections coming up in Queens, in the Bronx, like vote your prosecutors. Anybody else?
There are a couple questions for me. On recidivism, that's one of the interesting things. Every single day in my inbox, I get pings and pings and pings. So many of these people, supposedly really violent, terrible criminals, got short sentences, but 2, 3, and 5 years of post-release supervision, which can involve house arrest, monitoring. We all, read about Nipsey Hussle's somebody trying to get clothes at his shop and, associating with felons and associating with gang members. There's recidivism based on technical violations of parole, and it's a terrible thing. A lot of these guys got short sentences, but they are not out. They are controlled day and night, and when they're released on bail, they're controlled morning to night and night to morning, house arrest. It's a new system that is designed. We put the gang label on, and this will take me to your question. And then you get a whole new system that has nothing to do with our criminal justice system. And that is really insane. Our criminal justice system is supposed to be for criminals, you know? What makes a gang criminal any different than any other criminal? They should have the same rights. Going to your question, you're right. You know, honestly, I think of gangs, especially these crews, as simply neighborhood peer groups, and often kids who could use some investment. Like, we know there's a problem over here, cure violence. We know there's a problem, some more sports teams, some more, you know, math clubs, some trauma-informed school teachers and counselors. Nonetheless, I do think that answering these questions, unfortunately, in terms of how do we talk to people who think it's crazy that that someone in prison would vote, sometimes we got to do the coalition building and have a conversation that they can understand. If we didn't have the easy, these guys aren't even gang members and they are not even violent, we would still have a problem. And I think in the report, someplace I say, like, the process they get is, it wouldn't matter if they're the worst criminal ever. It's inconsistent with what our system is supposed to be, and on the anarchy note too, our system is crap even as designed. But, you know, it is worth getting this crossover, this is too broad, and then bring in the Trojan horse of what we need to be doing is what Vidal's working on, what Taylonn's working on, what Africa is talking about, investing resources. If we believe there's a problem here, let's solve it before somebody gets shot and killed.
If I could be real quick, you asked a question about how to get involved. How should students get involved? I think it's the 3 R's: read, research, and reports. The report, like write reports, like how Babe wrote the report. Read up on these things, you know. I said 3 R's, there's a W in there, but reports, you know. Back to your question, well, with your statement. This right here is revolution. This is revolutionary thinking. This is trying to change the way things are done to extent. And it starts with these young guys. All these young people that are in here that are students, that's where the change comes. Revolution is change. And that's to answer your question. Now, change into what system? That's a whole nother story. But revolution is change, and that's what we're doing right now. As far as individuals that are in jail or in prison or incarcerated that want to vote, I believe that people should be screened to see if they're capable of voting. You know, I'm not going to say that there aren't people that are in the prison system that haven't done anything. You know, we can't say everybody is innocent. Yes, it's unfair, but everybody's not innocent. We have to deal with balance, you know. A lot of people don't, well, just to say this, I work in the courts. I actually turned around after all the stuff that I'm going to and work in the courts. Why? Because I have to go to the source of where the problem is to start revolution, to have people think differently, to change the mindset of young people that come through there, you know? And also one thing we have to do too, we can be angry, but we have to channel that anger into something positive or something productive. So, and that's what I try to pride myself on. Everything that I'm going through, everything that I've went through, everything that all these panelists went through is something propelling them and pushing them towards something that's greater. And if we keep that positive energy and that positive vibration, and, you know, the revolution to come.
You haven't spoken in a while.
I just want to say something. Like the students that's going to school, when you do get your degree and all of that, and you start making some money and you working with people, like, you gotta, like, give these young dudes something to do. Like, I remember when I was growing up, summer youth, I go to the park, and it's like 60 kids out there, and I'm like, well, what happened to summer youth? So, I mean, you got 60 kids out there every day all summer. By the middle of the summer, they tearing each other's heads off, like, I mean, or going up the block. to tear somebody's head off. So use your resources to like give them an outlet, like, or even people that come home. Like if you got somebody that come home with a master's degree, you wouldn't give him a job, like give him a chance. Like maybe he could outreach to other people that's young, that's grown up, that ain't get that felony yet, you know, and change it. So that's what I used to do. I used to, when I was in school, I have a big tournament, bring Cardi B, and tell everybody in the hood to pull up. Like, we in college, like, come on, go crazy. Like, it's girls, you know, like, show them, like, and they all remember that. So, like, and it hurt them when I went away. So, use your resources to, like, outreach programs. I mean, Nipsey did a vector space. If there was a space in my neighborhood, I guarantee you cut any type of shooting by half. They gonna be in that space playing PS4 all day. I mean, so stuff like that. Like, get your degree, work, and go help. Like, because a white man coming through the hood, they gonna be like, and then you helping them, they gonna love you. You understand what I'm saying? Period. I ain't gonna protect you, like, put you up there.
You done? Okay. I think to add because I didn't want to cut you off. To add to that, with an ally that is privileged, whether it's racial or class-wise, gentrification is very real, and you're right that when white people do come to our neighborhoods, they're often given this savior complex of, oh, you came and you saved the black people, congrats. I will often urge anyone with privilege to check yourself and constantly realize, when are you speaking too much? When are you giving your people the tools to empower themselves? Because you're not gonna be around forever. You get burnout, and if you're constantly doing the speaking for people, if you're pushing them on the bike with training wheels, and then you leave and the training wheels fall off, they're gonna fall. And often this happens with activists and not just white folk, but this does happen with a lot of white folk and organizations that are predominantly ran by white people with money. They come, and I'm not just coming at you because you're white. I'm just going off the caveat of what Kraig said, but a lot of organizations do come into the hood and then they leave after a couple of years, and then they haven't trained anybody, so then the programs fail and then someone else comes in, and it's just a repeated cycle. So I think that that's important. Also, you know, voting in these midterm elections for your DAs, you're going to community board meetings and understanding the way local politics works in New York, especially Manhattan, not just because Manhattan is the best borough, but Manhattan is one of the most influential boroughs. New York City alone, they say the second hardest job in America after being the president is being the mayor of New York. The Manhattan DA, the New York mayor, is so influential, not just to the entire New York network and tri-state, but of America. That, you know, they talk to each other in Chicago and LA and all these places. New York is looked on as a very influential place. So I think for anyone wanting to get involved, understanding the politics, local politics of New York, I go to my community board meetings and there is so much power. For example, if someone wants to get a liquor license in New York, they have to come to the community board and advocate and say why they want to. And many businesses in Harlem have gotten denied opening whatever they want, sidewalks or et cetera, because the community board refused. But when I go to the community board, I'm literally one of probably the youngest person there. Everyone else is much older, and nothing wrong with people that are older, but they're not gonna be able to continue to go. We have to replenish, we have to get into that. We have to understand the budgeting, like Vidal said. So I think the approach is institutional, it's local, it's in the meso level, the middle level as well, and you have to understand where you can get in. And if you have the privilege of voting, if you have the privilege of attending these meetings because you have the time or et cetera, getting that knowledge and then sharing it. And if you don't have the privilege of doing those things, or you know people don't, I think it is your obligation and your duty. When you are a privileged person and you are interested in social justice, you have to find a way to disseminate that information in a way that you know your people will understand. So checking yourself. Again, I work with a lot of lawyers that do this work and they love it and they're great, but sometimes the information output is very difficult to understand because lawyers speak a different language. So I think just remembering that and being mindful of your community and not talking down on them and explaining things, allowing people to share their stories and not shunning someone because maybe they didn't go to college, but Miss Roberta lived in the neighborhood for 67 years and she knows exactly what gentrification is, she just don't call it that. Listening to them. So that's what I really push for is I just got into local politics and about a year and a half ago, and that really taught me so much about New York. Attending those community those board hearings in that are downtown in the courts that you did, they just put it in the video. I don't know what they're called, but they're also free. You can go, they list them on the website, and you hear their hearings where people are testifying and sharing their stories and holding people accountable. That's an amazing way to understand policy and hear multiple stories and see policy, law, and real stories intersect and come into play. So that's what I would encourage. Learn about that, find a way to disseminate it.
And do you want?
I didn't know we were just like answering all of them like rapid. I'm sorry. I think for you is really important because y'all really are the next generation of what really shapes our country. And the reason why I say our country, because I'm here, right? You know, there's a couple things that you can do, right? We have legal aid here. We have NAACP here. We have, and the organization I work for, Just Leadership USA, is actually volunteering your time with people who have been most harmed by the criminal justice system leading this work and being an understanding of what it means to be around people and how they organize. The second is organizing around issues and really shaping people's ideas around your neighborhood and people that you know, right? Because this don't make no fucking sense if all you know and you came here and watched and didn't use that knowledge to educate someone else. The most important third part is follows people's journeys. And what I mean is that follows people's Kraig's music, right? You know what I'm saying? Follow people's social media. You know, that's important, right? Because it might be one day that you might look at someone's social media and someone's trying to do a documentary and like, yo, I know someone. We can only do this work if we're creating bridges between each other. But, you know, Kraig being here is like important. And the reason why I say that, because a lot of people who are rappers feel like they're not comfortable or they're not accepted in this space because their music is different. But it's like, this is what we need to hear. You know, we call rap the tales of the urban community. So, you know, follow people, every three pillars that I said. And that's really it.
And we need to wrap this up, but if you guys have more questions, or if you have friends that couldn't make it tonight, we're doing this all over again on Saturday at 5 at the Bronx Defender's office, in the Bronx, obviously. And one thing you can do is go share the story and Kraig's film. That's on the Intercept website. You can find a link to Babe's research and report and their website, but really get the word out about his story.
And
That's easy.
There's a mailing list that Heather over there is we'll be having if you want to host a screening like at a high school, university, or anyone to know further and get to have more extensive conversations about this, please see Heather over there. Thank you.
And
Thank you guys so much.
Please eat, drink, or take food with you. Take extra reports as well. I have a lot of hard copies, and I want them out in the world. But eat. Take reports.